Hello, everyone. Welcome in to the off-season version of our live reaction show from BGN Radio. I'm Jesse Taylor. I'm here with Rachel, as always, behind the glass. Ben Natan is here with me as well. John Stolnis will jump in with us a little bit later. But it's basically like NFL Christmas or the start to the NFL Christmas season. It's draft day, and we're about to sit here. And there's already been some wild things that have happened, not only just with the Eagles, with trades happening already. We're, still the Seahawks are on the clock at the number 5 pick. We're waiting till the Eagles get to do their pick at 10, but the Eagles have gotten not an extra pick, have swapped picks already tonight. We'll talk about the Jonathan Gannon situation and the tampering that apparently the Cardinals have decided to self-report their tampering that they executed. The Texans are, doing everything they can to get their guys and, build up that roster a little bit. So Ben's going to come in with me to start. We're going to talk a little bit about the Jonathan Gannon situation. I feel like we have to talk about it. And there was a tweet that I saw, and I want to give this person adequate credit because it was something that made me laugh out loud. It's regrettably Sixers Matt quote tweeted the initial tweet from Adam Schefter, said, announcing what had happened. And it says, "Cardinals, we're going to take your shittiest coach, Howie Roseman. Pay me." And I think that is unbelievable and true. You can't hear anything I'm saying. Oh my God. Can anyone else hear anything I'm saying? That's wild.
You hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you.
Oh no. Someone needs to jump into our comments right now and tell me if you can hear me.
All right.
Well, we're going to talk about the Jonathan Gannon situation. We'll get Ben's sound situation figured out. But basically what happened, I guess, is the Cardinals called Jonathan Gannon right after the NFC Championship game, which is technically a time period where he is not supposed to be contacted by anybody. And they self-reported that to the NFL that they did that. So then all of a sudden, what they decided to do is they decided to work with the compensation there, and basically they swapped third-round picks. So instead of the Eagles having the 94 pick in the third round, they have jumped down to 66. So now they have 62 in the second round and then right back again at 66 in the third round. So, tomorrow's draft will be tremendous for us in terms of, getting those picks a little bit close together. John's here with us, and John's going to jump in and give us his thoughts on this because it's like 8:00. You get the ESPN notification that the draft is starting, and then all of a sudden you get this Schefter notification that there's some tampering issue with the Eagles and Cardinals, and the Eagles are already getting what's going on. What are your thoughts here?
Leave it to the Cardinals to not only hire Jonathan Gannon and save us from ourselves,
yes,
but to also do it in a way in which they're forced to swap third-round picks, tampering with the process, and thereby giving up essentially a mid-third rounder in terms of overall value with the draft pick. It's stunning in its incompetence, and it's a beautiful thing to behold. Like, somebody tampered in order to hire Jonathan Gannon. The words can't come out of your mouth without it making you laugh. I mean, it's just insane.
Pew pew pew.
Pew, 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 pew. Come on, this guy.
That's all I could
It's gonna be a disaster in Arizona.
They're better. Now, I will say the one positive thing that the Cardinals have done tonight, I personally think they came out on top of that trade with the Texans. I don't know.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
That's a lot to give up, in my opinion, for a non-quarterback player. It makes you think, why didn't they draft Will Anderson Jr. and then trade back in for CJ? But were there, better trade offers out there for the Cardinals for other teams that would have been in the quarterback game? You don't know, but I thought that was, a lot to give up for, a guy who, he's obviously the best defensive player in the draft, or one of them, arguably the best, right? So, you want your guy, you go get your guy. But so at least the Cardinals came out on top of that situation.
Yeah, I think you're for sure. And the Cardinals are likely to get a high first-round pick next year. That 2024 pick from the Texans. The Texans are likely to be pretty awful again next year. So the Cardinals could be looking at picking number 2, number 3. There's an outside chance they're picking 1, depending on how bad the Texans are next year. And so the Arizona Cardinals had to do it. And I don't know if it had anything to do with trying to recoup some of that value that they lost when they had to swap third-round picks with the Eagles. Sure. I probably would have made that draft deal regardless, because you do get a ton of value there. And for a team like the Cardinals that are in rebuild mode, you're still picking pretty early in the first round. You get some other picks that'll help you towards next year. This is not a one-year thing; it's a multi-year effort for these guys. And the Eagles have for a long time. Howie Roseman has for a long time been kind of on the ground floor of taking advantage of other general managers undervaluing their 2024 pick, the future picks, the picks for next year. And the Cardinals did that in this particular situation, understanding, this is not going to be a one-year fix. So I think it was actually a really smart trade by the Cardinals. I think they did a good job there.
I would absolutely agree. It's also just really interesting to talk about a team being in rebuild mode when you've got a, $100+ million guy under center that you still can't trust, but are still paying that money.
Right.
That's my most me. Ben, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We got you 5x5, bud.
What do you think about, we're still on this whole Jonathan Gannon situation. We've already made the pew, pew, pew sound effects. What are your thoughts? Where is your brain here?
I just think it's going to be really funny when Gannon comes to Philadelphia next year, because the boos are going to be probably louder than the Eagles Washington game where they sacked Wentz 9 times, because the thought of him, looking for real estate in Glendale, Arizona, while he should have been game planning for the Chiefs, I don't know. It makes me very upset, but it is also very funny considering the fact that the Cardinals got punished so heavily for tampering for a coach that no one in the Eagles fan base wanted to keep. I think that's really funny.
So this is coming down the pike right now. The Cardinals are trading up with the Lions to number 6 right now. So the Cardinals are about to go on the clock. Do they jump in front and take Jalen Carter here?
You know what? Just rub some salt in the wound. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's just add one more reason to hate Jonathan Gannon at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, jeez.
I'm trying to think what else they would.
I hope they don't do it for. I hope they don't do it for 2 reasons. One, obviously, I want him in Philadelphia, and 2, Carter seems like a guy who's going to live to his full potential in a very stable organization and locker room that can really hold him, a coaching staff that can really be patient with him. And that is not Arizona. I mean, the general management has been on the rocks for a few years there. Ownership is big time on the rocks, especially after poor ratings from the NFLPA and various allegations against Michael Bidwell, the president of the organization. And, we all probably feel the same about Jonathan Gannon. I mean, that organization is unstable from the top down. And for a young man to go to that team, a young man who probably needs a little bit more help early on in his career, you would hate to see so much talent potentially get wasted by an organization that would have no idea what to do with them.
Well, their pick is in, and reportedly they're going to be taking Ohio State offensive tackle Paris Johnson.
Well,
Jalen Carter remains on the board.
This becomes more and more interesting. It's so funny. I mean, everyone's mock draft was shot the second the Texans took CJ Stroud. Completely shot. Yes. And I think that's the most fun, to be completely honest with you. This is way more fun when you have no idea what's going on. I also love when there's not a consensus number 1 overall pick. It just brings something a little extra into the draft, because, we can sit here and talk again for at least another 10 minutes if the Eagles are going to go, offense or defense. But right now, I guess we're all sort of leaning towards defense as long as Jalen Carter stays on the board.
Now, I believe that I was just going to say Paris Johnson to the Cardinals was a pick that was floated by Albert Breer a few days ago. Apparently, Kyler Murray is a really big fan of Paris Johnson. So this could be a signal that they're letting Kyler really run the show and hoping to build around Kyler for the future, which is probably a good move if you're going to be paying a guy that much money.
I was going to say, I would hope so.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to. We were just talking about that as you were coming on. Like the idea that the Cardinals are like in rebuild mode, but are paying their quarterback, $100+ million, and that's the position they're in, but also in rebuild mode. Like, kind of blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, it really it's a testament to how poorly of a job Steve Keim did during his tenure there to really fill out the roster. I mean, the roster is, if you have strong positive feelings about Kyler, I think he could probably be, in the top 10 quarterbacks in the league at his best. It's still a very top heavy roster. They have a few good players here and there, but there's no depth. They're weak in the trenches. And, there's a reason that they were picking third overall, not just because of Kyler's injury, but also because it's just a very poorly built football team.
Well, the thing that this does is it certainly puts Jalen Carter within trade up range. I think the thought was that if he falls to around 7, that sitting there at number 10, the Eagles have enough ammunition to move up and to grab him at this point. So we're officially in Eagles trade up position now. I don't think necessarily that he would fall to them at 10. I mean, but he is falling here. There are a lot of teams a lot of mocks. I saw him going to 5, saw him going here at number 7 to the Lions. And now it looks like, or pardon me, at 6 to the Lions, but they traded out of that pick. And so now you're in Howie Roseman territory where he can jump up a few spots if he wants to go and get this kid, provided that that's who they're after. I mean, I think that all the indications have been reading the tea leaves that they love this kid, but there might be something else up Howie's sleeve. So who knows? This is really interesting, though. I think it's falling. If the idea here was to trade up to get Jalen Carter, everything has happened to make that happen, right? All the dominoes have fallen in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to what I was alluding to earlier about Jalen Carter, there was reports early in the college football season, from Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, about Carter's maturity issues. And personally, I tend not to give those too much stock because it's hard to really gauge the maturity of 20 and 21-year-old very, very young men. And put in really unique situations at all of this exposure, all of this platform. And I generally think it's pretty unfair, but those rumors were there. And if Lance Zierlein is talking about it, then NFL teams are talking about it. Of course, there was a situation back in March where Carter was had to turn himself in for charges of racing and reckless driving related to an accident that killed 2 people, and that obviously feeds into discussions about maturity concerns. And the conversation ever since then has been about, if he is going to be successful in the NFL, it has to be in an organization that is willing to stabilize around him. And I think that there's a lot of consensus also that Philadelphia is a great place for that. Not just because of the coaching staff, not just because of the continuity at the general management level, but also for the very simple reason that Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean are right there in that locker room. Mentors, older players who have a really good relationship with Jalen Carter, a place that he would feel very at home. And, phenomenal player on the field, no doubt about it. He's my number 1 player in the class. I compared him to Geno Atkins, the Cincinnati Bengals, former Cincinnati Bengals star, but landing in a position where he can really have things stabilize around him is going to be really important. And Philadelphia makes a lot of sense. I thought Seattle made a lot of sense as well. In my final mock draft, I had him going to Seattle, but Philadelphia, in terms of top 10 teams, top 10 picking teams, Philadelphia makes the most sense as well.
And to go, I mean, not only do you have guys that he's familiar with coming into the locker room, you also have the guys along the lines of the Brandon Grahams, the Fletcher Cox, who are on the defensive side, but then you have the Lane Johnsons, the Jason Kelce's, the people who have really built this culture that is, it's built to, support young players coming in and reaching their potential, but also, keeping their head on straight and learning how to, grow into adults. Because you're right, at, 20, 21 years old, obviously, this is not to minimize anything that happened in the situation, but, a lot of 20 and 21-year-olds do dumb things, but most 20 and 21-year-olds aren't star football players in college, So it's if there's something to be helped there, you're absolutely right that the Eagles are one of the best organizations for him in that kind of moment.
Let's say they don't trade up to get Jalen Carter and he goes in like the next pick or two. What's the level of disappointment in the room? Is it really missed opportunity, like when the Eagles didn't go get CeeDee Lamb? Remember when they had the opportunity, it felt like, there's CeeDee Lamb, he's right there, he's falling, they have it, they can do it. And they didn't go ahead and pull the trigger. Would it kind of feel like that? Because I also am concerned that maybe we've all been swallowing the Jalen Carter hype a lot. And I love the kid. I mean, I think he's a great player. He'd be great in this locker room. But sometimes I think we kind of get into a little bit of an echo chamber with certain players. And, we're kind of only seeing the rosier scenario, the positive of bringing him on board. And I know the Eagles will take a really close look. They have a great team that looks into the backgrounds of all these guys and does their homework on all this kind of stuff. But just something to at least consider as a pumping of the brakes, I guess, a little bit. I want Jalen Carter. I want them to move up, and I'm trying to determine what my level of disappointment would be if they don't go ahead and pull the trigger here. What about you guys?
I came into the day thinking about Will Anderson on the Eagles, and when Houston took him, I was pretty bummed out. But at the end of the day, I trust this front office. They've really earned a lot of trust over the last 2 years in the way that they've turned the team around after the 2020 season. It would be a bummer. Carter is a great prospect. On the field, I think he's the best player in the class. But there's still other great players in this class that could help the team immediately. It wouldn't be the best situation in the world, but I'm still very confident that there's still Bijan Robinson, there's still Nolan Smith, there's still really, really good players available at the moment who could help this team day one, and that's kind of that'd be my feeling on the matter. And I guess like the other thing I'm feeling is like if all of those red flags are a big worry for the teams that haven't picked him yet, I'm thinking of Seattle especially. Maybe it's not worth the hassle. Like maybe it's like, okay, well, maybe we don't have to worry about that. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think at 10, there's still so many options out there that it's hard to be supremely disappointed. When we got with this, we compared it to the CeeDee Lamb situation. With the CeeDee Lamb situation, the rest of them were off the board. CeeDee Lamb was the last one left. And then we saw how it unfolded and then how it continued, which made it hurt a little bit more. Yeah. But I think that at 10, we're still in a spot where there are still enough picks or players available where it's like you can't really go wrong if you choose, any of these guys left kind of deal. So I wouldn't be that disappointed. It would be a bummer if it pans out and he's one of the greatest defensive players we've ever seen. But I think that there's plenty of options there. Ben, you mentioned Bijan Robinson. Where do you guys fall on that? I know that's been like the hottest controversial topic of the lead up to the draft, is that obviously, the Eagles haven't valued a running back significantly in recent years. Obviously, they took Miles Sanders with a second-round pick, and now, their running back room this year is making less than Miles is making this year with the Panthers. If that's what, kind of the philosophy that they've run with, same thing with linebackers over the last 30 years, right? Like they don't draft them in the first round. They take them in later rounds and then they run through their rookie deal and then they end up elsewhere. Do you think they change the mentality? Is Bijan that guy that they change the mentality for, or is that not even worth our mental thought?
In terms of Bijan the player, I think that he is absolutely a player worth taking very high. I think he's one of the 3 best players in this class. He's a day one game changer. He'd be the first true 3-down back that the Eagles have had since Shady McCoy. And I think that's valuable. I think it's valuable because One, you're trying to take more pressure off of Jalen Hurts in the backfield. Jalen Hurts took a lot of big hits last year as a runner, especially we think about that hit against the Bears that injured his shoulder. And they're probably going to want to figure out a way to reduce that sort of mileage. And a bell cow running back is a great way to do that. Their backfield right now has some intriguing players, but there's no sure thing. Kenneth Gainwell looked great in the playoffs, but we've never seen him as a featured back. Rashad Penny, all the talent in the world, hasn't played a healthy season in the NFL yet. Boston Scott is a great third back, a great kind of scat back, but definitely not a guy who could lead a rushing game. So there's a lot of not sure things that they have right now. And in terms of running back value, I think a misconception about the Eagles and about Howie Roseman is that he doesn't value running backs. And it's true, they've only, like you said, they've only spent higher than a third round pick on a running back once since they drafted Shady McCoy back in 2009, and that was with Miles Sanders. But they were very much in on Ezekiel Elliott in 2015. It took a very bad interview with Deuce Staley for that pick not to happen. And they really loved Christian McCaffrey in 2017. And it really was the Panthers loving McCaffrey and not wanting to move out of that spot for the Eagles not to get him. So there have been running backs that have absolutely been on the Eagles' radar in the past. Truly special qualities. If there's any through line between McCaffrey and Ezekiel Elliott, it's 3-down back potential, bell cow potential, which Bijan Robinson absolutely has.
I think we're discounting it in terms of whether or not the Eagles might take Bijan if he's sitting there at number 10, or even if they move down a spot or two, depending on how the board falls. One of the main reasons they might make this, pick Bijan as their guy is Howard Eskin has said he will retire if they do so. And so you can imagine that would be a motivating factor, right? I mean,
I'm all in. Bijan or bust. Let's go.
Two birds.
Also, time out. We need to take a moment for Tyree Wilson's suit, because that is one of the best things I've ever seen. That's a phenomenal suit. The florals.
Yeah, Tyree to the Raiders at 7, and yeah, he is. That's pretty good.
That's a lot of fabric too. That's a big man.
That's a large man. Did you see the way he picked up Roger Goodell like a rag doll?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure the Raiders are hoping he's going to do that to a lot of offensive tackles too, I'm sure.
The Falcons pick is in, and they're keeping the camera on Jalen Carter.
Bijan, it's Bijan.
Can you imagine?
The Falcons take Bijan.
They are a bad drafting organization. I wonder what they're going to do here. Are they going to get it right?
The Falcons have selected Bijan.
Really?
Oh, that's happened.
Yes.
Oh, this is like a thing.
It's happening.
Oh, okay. I missed. I didn't get.
Are the Eagles going to be able to just sit at 10 and get Jalen Carter? That would be insane.
Well, the speculate, if the Bears, I think it's between Carter and Skoronski for the Bears, right? I think that's what the conversation has been right now. And you got to believe Howie Roseman is calling them up and saying, all right, look, who are you taking? Because we want Carter, and I think the Bears would be just as happy with either player. I mean, I can't imagine that they would be so in on one and not the other, because both would give them real value, but in completely different ways. And so I got to believe there's a phone call happening and saying, listen, we really want Jalen. Would you willing to move back a pick and take Skoronski or whatever? But I mean, it's entirely possible they can sit there at 10 and get Jalen Carter. Now, that would freak everybody out is if Jalen Carter is sitting there at 10, the Eagles pick at 10, and they pull a different name out of the hat. You cannot discount that from happening.
Yeah,
we're just assuming that if he's there at 10, the Eagles are going to take him.
I won't lie, that would really suck. If they drafted Nolan Smith, I would be like, well, I would have taken Carter, but Smith is still going to be really great here. But this class for me had 3 blue chip players. Day one could be one of the top 10 players at their position type of guys, and that is Jalen Carter, Bijan Robinson, and Will Anderson. So if they pass on a guy like Carter at 10, it would be a disappointment.
We're also discounting the fact that in true Eagles luck fashion, if Bijan goes now and Jalen Carter goes to the Bears right after in the 1-2 right before the Eagles, that would be very, very on brand as well.
Yes. And then that's when you either trade back or take Nolan Smith.
Yeah.
That would be what I would do.
And I'm all about Nolan Smith here at number 10. I mean, sometimes you don't want to overthink it. They could trade back and maybe they can, maybe they can get a cornerback, if they move down a few spots. But Nolan Smith is going to play. I mean, he's got such a great head for the game. And I know his production numbers weren't great in college, but again, like we said the same thing with Jordan Davis last year. They timeshare their defensive line much the same way the Eagles do. So those guys just don't pile up a bunch of counting stats. And so, yeah, I think you really can't go wrong at 10 with those two picks. But I think certainly Jalen Carter would be the more dynamic fit. And how much production of Javon Hargrave do you think he would be able to replace? Like, is he getting the same number of snaps, the same number of reps that Javon Hargrave had? And obviously he's a all-pro player, so you can't expect that in his rookie season. But how much production could we expect from Jalen Carter in his rookie season, do you think, Ben?
Well, I think you're probably going to see a bigger role from Milton Williams next year. Absolutely. And that's definitely, I mean, he played really well down the stretch for the Eagles, and I think they probably think very highly of him. But the Eagles like to rotate very deep into their depth chart on the defensive line. So, Carter in Philadelphia theoretically would still see, a much bigger snap load than let's say Jordan Davis was seeing before his injury. Jordan Davis was averaging around 25 to 30% of the defensive snaps before.
Hang on, big news. Ian Rappaport reporting the Eagles have traded up one spot. They are now on the clock.
All right, let's see what happens.
You are a Philadelphia Eagle.
Howard Eskin just tweeted, Atlanta Falcons take running back Bijan Robinson. I do not retire. That's
well, we'll take that L tonight, I guess.
Yeah.
Please be the only L I have to take today. Please.
All right, so let's put our cards on the table. Is it Jalen Carter?
Yes. Come on, Howie, do it.
In the recent years, when Howie has done the thing that we all expected, it's gone well. Like, I think Jordan Davis is going to be the guy. Devontae Smith was a great pick. When you don't overthink it, I think, there's some picks that you don't really need to overthink. It's when you start to go galaxy brain on yourself that you run into problems.
I absolutely agree. And it's worth noting that in both cases, the Devontae Smith and the Jordan Davis picks, the Eagles moved up to get both of them.
Yes, they did.
And they only moved up. I think they moved from 12 to 10 to get Smith, and they moved up from 15 to 13 to get Davis, I believe. So these small jumps are very much in Howie's arsenal to guarantee he gets the player he wants.
Now, Ed Kratz of Sports Illustrated is saying that the Eagles are sending a 4th-round pick to Chicago, but they don't have a 4th-round pick. Are we talking like
maybe a future 4th?
Like a 24 4th? I mean, they have like 8 million picks next year. So
listen, if Howie literally swapped picks and sent them next year's 4,
that's what it is.
Jalen Carter. Why do people keep picking up the phone when he calls? I mean, like, I support it, but why do people keep answering his phone calls?
Well, if you look at it from the Bears' perspective, they probably wanted Skoronski. They were willing to take Skoronski there. They know the Eagles aren't moving up to take Skoronski, so it's absolutely no loss to them whatsoever to get a 4th-round pick next year. And so it's that makes the most sense. And it looks like it's official. It is Jalen Carter.
Go Birds.
All right, let's go. Let's go.
Jalen Carter's an Eagle, baby.
And you know what's so funny? Mina Kimes tweeted, "This draft is breaking so well for Philly. What else is new?" Mm-hmm. This right here is new. This doesn't happen. What do you mean, Mina?
Yeah,
I love Mina Kimes.
Yeah, I guess like Howie has been balling out so much the last 2 years that we've like just totally memory hold the previous like 3 drafts that happened.
That's right.
Which is fun. He's totally redeemed in my eyes for like 2019, 2020. Everyone's just like, well, we are now, Philadelphia is now the rich get richer team, which, fine by me.
It's weird. I don't feel that way. I feel very much like, I feel like Shaq's kids, right? Like they don't have money. He has money. That's what he tells them. Like,
Yeah, right.
You're not rich. I am. That's how I feel, because I don't feel like this doesn't happen to us. I don't feel like this is normal, but I enjoy it. I would like it to continue.
And I'm thinking here, you know, the Eagles let Javon Hargrave go, and he signs a huge deal.
Right.
But he's heading into his 30s. And so you would expect the production is going to drop at some point. It might come next year, it might come 2 years from now, but that's a lot of money that you're committing to a player in his 30s over the next 4 years or whatever the contract was. I'm not remembering the length. And now you're getting basically this is your Javon Hargrave replacement, a guy who might be the best overall talent in the entire draft. You're bringing a guy into a locker room and a culture that is second to none in the NFL. You're pairing him with former teammates, and yeah, this is just it makes so much sense. These last few first rounds have just made so much sense. It's lovely.
It is. It's just don't overthink it. Like, and something that Sam and I talk about on Babes on Broad, like every single year when we're talking about the draft, it's like LSU, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama. Don't overthink it. Just take the ones that are there and do it. Just go for it. Like, don't think
this
too
is
hard.
The third year. Yeah, I mean, I think what happened too is Howie is like, I don't even want to say he's overcorrecting, but you know, not to relitigate something that really hurt all of our feelings, but 2020, you have Justin Jefferson on the board, reigning national champion. You take Jalen Reagor, obviously total disaster. 3 straight drafts now, Howie has drafted the best player from the national championship team. 3 straight drafts. You got Devontae Smith after winning a Heisman, Jordan Davis after winning the Nagurski Award, and now you get Jalen Carter, you know, one of the most decorated defensive linemen in the country, fresh off a national championship win.
Yeah, he didn't overthink it. You make the obvious pick. You pick the most talented player in the draft, and you believe in your culture. You believe in your locker room. You bring this guy in here, and I wonder. You know, I think he really. I'll say this about Howie Roseman, and I don't know him personally. I don't know that any of us know him personally. Never spoken to the man in my life, but he seems to at least be a guy who has learned from mistakes. We saw that with the Carson Wentz contract, that they were willing to just eat that dead money and not fall victim, you know, to all the different fallacies with you know, the sunk costs and all that kind of stuff, and to learn from trying to squeeze a guy in ahead of where he should be picked because of a perceived fit, like they tried to do with Jalen Reagor, over a guy like Justin Jefferson, who it wasn't hindsight. We were all yelling and screaming in the moment that it was the wrong decision to make. And again, that was one of those things where they got too create. They thought too hard. They galaxy brained it. And I think we're just seeing in Howie Roseman, like you were saying, Ben, a correction to that, because this is the smart decision. It's the obvious, sometimes the obvious decision. You thank the heavens that a decision is so clear and you just make it. And you don't say to yourself, gosh, well, why is he here? Is this, maybe we should go in a different direction? I mean, you could talk yourself out of it, but I'm so glad they didn't do that.
No. And
yeah.
you know, go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
The last thing I want to say is that 2 years in a row, 2021, 2022 drafts, they drafted 2 players from the reigning national champions. You know, we got Landon Dickerson too, and we got Nakobe Dean last year on top of Jordan Davis. Could they make it 3 in a row with the 30th overall pick, maybe drafting a guy like Darnell Washington, or maybe wanting to move up and grab Nolan Smith as well? I think that's well within what's possible. Oh, here we go. Here's the official Goodell call.
By the way, did you see what Jalen Carter's mom was wearing tonight? The color dress that she was wearing? Midnight green. They knew.
There you go.
They knew it was happening. They knew it was happening. You're never going to convince me otherwise. Never going to convince me otherwise.
Go Birds.
Yeah.
And
just the look on his face is, I get to play with Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean again.
Yeah, how happy is that guy? I mean,
yeah.
Goodness gracious.
That's awesome. That makes me that
suit too. I like that color.
Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter are about to terrorize offensive guards and centers for the next 10 years. It's going to be beautiful.
And Jeff McClain was tweeting out that the Eagles apparently had been calling up teams over these last few minutes, not just the Bears, but calling up to the teams in front of the Bears about potentially moving up. And as it turns out, he didn't have to trade with any of those teams. They weren't picking Carter. And I'm surprised he fell. But whenever there's always something you don't expect, and you didn't expect the Texans to pick 2 and 3 in this draft, and to screw things up, and so it's just, that's part of the fun of this. You read all the mocks, and then the Texans trade up and pick 2 and 3 in the draft and just throw everything out of whack. So, but yeah, it's just such a good fit. It's a perfect fit for what they're doing. And if you're another team, I mean, this Eagles team has the best quarterback in the NFC. They went to the Super Bowl last year. They're primed for another Super Bowl run this year, and they're sitting here picking 9 and getting the best defensive player in the draft. It's not fair. These other teams who are picking in the top 10, you got the Panthers and the Texans and the Colts and the Seahawks and the Cardinals and the Raiders and the Falcons, and these teams all stink. And then you have the Eagles sitting here amongst these top 10. They're not going to be drafting this high again for a number of years. So they really did have to go after it and get this guy. And the fact that they didn't have to cannibalize what few picks they have this year in order to do it was also a great thing.
Yeah. And now the question is, they still got that other first round pick. I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Well, it's interesting. The Will Levis situation, seeing how far he might fall, can knock some of the other quarterbacks back a little bit. I really do think another team's going to come calling at number 30 to grab maybe one of those back end of the first round quarterbacks to get that 5th-year rookie option on that guy and allow the Eagles to trade back into the second round. I think that would be the most, if one of those guys is still available, then I think the Eagles should absolutely do that.
Yeah, I think now that we're about to get out of the top 10, the next big pivot point in the draft is going to be the 11th pick. What the Titans decide to do. I think it's very possible that the Titans go quarterback.
I agree. I mean, you heard all the Derrick Henry rumors going around. I don't know how close he is or was. I don't know how close the team is to moving on from him, but I certainly think they don't have a whole lot of. They gotta find a future that's not Ryan Tannehill. I mean, Tannehill had a nice couple of seasons there, but he has a hard time staying healthy, and he's just not an elite guy. And we're seeing you need to have somebody like that. I absolutely would, if I was. You got to have that quarterback. And if I'm sitting there and I'm the Titans, I'm absolutely looking at quarterback. If I see one I really like, and some people were talking about Levis as like the number 2 or number 3 overall pick at one point. So, I mean, I think you're right. I think it's a fascinating position to be in. If they don't go quarterback, then he falls even further. And, that enhances the possibility the Eagles move out of number 30.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth noting, with Tennessee now has a new general manager. Mike Vrabel, during his time there, has not been able to handpick a quarterback. He inherited the Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill dynamic. Tannehill stepped in and had a career renaissance, and like you said, played a few really good years down in Tennessee. But this is an opportunity for Vrabel to make his mark on the franchise and pick a guy. And I think Levis makes a lot of sense. He has the potential, the arm, the athleticism, the size. To be a franchise quarterback. And if, he is to sit for a year behind Tannehill, that's fine. But if they want to move Tannehill and let Levis take the reins immediately, I think that's also fine.
He's in the last year of that contract this year?
I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, if they want to let him take the reins, I think that would make sense. But also, there's also like no harm in letting him sit for a year and make sure that he's ready to go. And
definitely.
And he'll play that out and not.
Yeah, and there's also the dark horse possibility of them drafting Hendon Hooker here, which has been a name that we've heard a ton of over the last few weeks, a guy that teams are very high on. Personally, he's a 25-year-old rookie. He's coming off a knee injury. I think it's very risky, but everything I've heard about Hendon Hooker is that he is interviewing extremely well, and franchises put a lot of priority on character and leadership qualities for the quarterback position. So, and you can't discount the Tennessee connection, of course. So I think that is also a small possibility as well. I think the Titans can and should go quarterback here, but we will see.
Adam Schefter just tweeted out, by drafting Jalen Carter at 9, Howie Roseman's record remains intact. He has never, actually, Adam Schefter accidentally tweeted that she has never, I think he was typing wrong there. He has never drafted a running back, cornerback, tight end, or safety in the first round. But there is another, if they pick number 30, there is a chance they could break that streak. But still, never picked a guy at any of those positions in the first round of the draft. He's a trenches man.
And it's funny because I think if they do stay at 30, it will be one of those positions. It will be Jahmyr Gibbs, Darnell Washington, or
Wow.
Darnell Wright. Wow.
That's
what are you doing,
pick.
Chicago?
I love that pick. I think that's a fantastic pick. Darnell Wright was my my number 2 ranked offensive tackle behind Paris Johnson. He was the only person who was able to slow down Will Anderson at all. He's a big, heavy-handed offensive tackle who can keep Justin Fields safe, but also grind it out in the run game. I really like that pick by the Bears. It's a little bit out of the box. I don't think a lot of people had Wright as a top 10 pick, but I think that's going to be a slam dunk for them.
Marcus Spears tweeted, "I hate Howie Roseman because he's so good at his job."
Awesome.
Man, we weren't saying that 2 years ago, were we? How times
No, we were
changed.
not. We were not.
I mean, he created all the problems that he had to fix. They were all his fault.
True.
But I appreciate that he fixed them and was self-aware enough to do so, because there was a period of time in there where I thought that he was kind of just like, I gave you a Lombardi trophy, I can do whatever the hell I want kind of thing. Like, just kind of a little bit blinded by the shine of the Lombardi. But he has been self-aware enough to course correct. And whether it's in overcompensation or not, no notes, no complaints from me.
And I will say too, there's a level of humility that this team has shown over the years, which I think is a lesson for other franchises and organizations to be able to admit that you've made a mistake or that your approach was faulty or something, and to then say, yeah, we're not going to do that way again, and we're going to do things differently, and to admit that and to just own it. That's a level of maturity that you don't see from a lot of other organizations and general managers. And I think it creates a culture of accountability among the players too. I mean, everybody's holding each other accountable and holding themselves accountable. And Howie Roseman's doing that as well, along with Jeffrey Lurie. Jeffrey Lurie's involved in this process, maybe as much, if not more, than any other owner other than, Jerry Jones. And so, there's the culture works here because there's a level of humility, I think, in the decision-making process of realizing past mistakes and learning from them. And that's, what you hope that your front office does. It's the teams that keep making the same mistakes over and over again, year after year, are the ones who lose for 20 years in a row.
This is also a good point here from Patrick that, he does have something that most GMs don't have, and it's really significant job security. So, I mean, and, winning a Super Bowl does help you with that, but you also saw that winning a Super Bowl didn't necessarily give Doug Peterson that, for example. So,
right.
While Doug Peterson didn't really get the opportunity to course correct, and obviously, we don't really know what Doug wanted to do or not, or if, that meeting was, listen, I don't really want to do this anymore kind of thing. Who knows? But, Jeffrey Lurie did give Howie Roseman the opportunity to learn from the mistakes and improve. And it's a good point that most GMs really can't think about 5 years down the road. I mean, think about the Titans GM who got fired right after they lost to the Eagles. Like, he traded away AJ Brown and then got fired after AJ Brown torched them in a different uniform. Like, there wasn't an opportunity to course correct on that or possibly, fix that decision. Now, were there other things that he did prior that might have gotten him there? Maybe, but was also not, we thought in 2020, we were looking at 3 to 5 years of top 10 picks, not because we traded for them. We thought we were looking at some really, really, really tough times to come. And here we are, 2 football seasons removed from that, and we're in the Super Bowl. So that's a really good point, that most GMs don't have that luxury to be able to kind of set themselves, if there is something that sets them back so far, to be able to course correct and take the time to do that.
And I'll say,
The other thing I was going to say is that, the NFL changes so quickly, and with Howie Roseman being here for as long as he has been, there's been so many opportunities given to him with that job security to adjust to how the league is now playing, the ways that the game is changing, the different values on different positions. And sometimes he's found himself behind the curve, and sometimes he's found himself ahead of the curve. But there's an organizational understanding at the highest level, from Jeffrey Lurie, that giving Howie the ability to adjust to what the rest of the league is doing has been the best for him, and of course been the best for the team as well.
Looking like you mentioned the Titans at number 11 here with a key pick. Looks like they're going with Skoronski at number 11, Ben.
Wow. Not drafting Will Levis.
Yeah, you're going to get an offensive lineman to block the quarterback you're not drafting. So that's an interesting theory. Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I think so. I mean, I think, again, this is good news for the Eagles. Some of these quarterbacks falling in the middle of the first round, and they could be falling later into the first round, because now you're starting to get to some teams that have quarterbacks that aren't looking to take a quarterback here in the first round of the draft. And so it's kind of setting up well again for the Eagles to kind of make some noise at number 30. And I don't know, was there a chance they would trade up from number 30? Nobody's talked about that as a possibility, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I don't think, unless somebody unexpected falls. But let me do a little chaos at you here. Let's say Hendon Hooker or Will Levis. Let's say Will Levis is there at 30. They trade out of that pick, right? I mean, they're not taking a quarterback like they took Jalen Hurts when Carson Wentz signed the deal as like a long-term backup kind of option. That's not happening, right?
No, absolutely not. Not with a fifth-year option on the table.
Good call. Good call. That's right. Yeah.
But I mean, I think a trade up is possible as well. I mean, I still think there are possibilities for, the Commanders are still up, the Lions are still up, the Bucks are still up, the Seahawks as well. I mean, there's still a lot of quarterback needy teams that are picking over the next 10 picks. So any one of them could try to get Levis or maybe even Hendon Hooker, and that would just push other talent down. So, I mean, Christian Gonzalez is still on the board. He's one of the best players in the draft. We've talked about Nolan Smith already. I know there was an Adam Schefter tweet about the positions how he hasn't drafted, but, Brian Branch, Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington. And, there's still always the looming possibility that the Eagles want to get a running back, and Jahmyr Gibbs is probably going to be there at the second half of the first round as well.
Nope. It looks like at number 12 overall, the Lions are taking Jahmyr Gibbs.
Wow. Are they trading? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm on my tweet deck while we're doing this, and it's coming in like way faster than ESPN. So I'm jumping the gun on everybody. I'm sorry. But no, yeah, that's what it looks like with pick 12. It looks like the Lions are going to take Jahmyr Gibbs.
Wow.
That's two running backs in the top 12. Two running backs in the top 12.
Yeah, and Jahmyr Gibbs is an interesting player because he was playing in Georgia Tech, and then was able to move into the Alabama offense, and spending 1 year in a true pro style offense with a legit offensive line. He looked fantastic running the ball, but more importantly for the modern NFL, he's probably the best pass catching running back to come out of college football since Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he's running wide receiver level routes at a very high level and has soft hands. I mean, he's fast as hell, 4.3 speed. And he makes a ton of sense in a Lions offense that loves to run the ball and loves to get the ball in the hands of the running back in the passing game as well. So I think that's a great pick by them. People might poo-poo it because of the strong feelings about running backs in the first round, but that's a player who's going to come in on day one and touch the ball 20 times a game for that team and help them bring them into the next level.
Mike Vrabel looks a little bit happier than he did when AJ Brown was traded.
It's a different first round for him this time around.
He's not walking out of the war room. storming out and slamming the door behind him.
It's kind of interesting. We haven't seen any big trades of NFL players like we saw last year with AJ Brown. I thought maybe we might see something like that, like a DeAndre Hopkins or something move here in the first round, or Buda Baker might get moved or something like that. But it doesn't. I mean, that once the Aaron Rodgers trade went through, and Lamar Jackson signs with the Ravens, I guess we're not going to see any teams move some marquee players here in the first round. I mean, there's still time, but we saw it earlier in the draft last year than we have so far this year.
Yeah, since the Texans and the Eagles jump, it's been relatively calm and straightforward, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the way that a lot of player deals went down this offseason, I don't think any major player deal went down this offseason where somebody got moved for a first-round pick. So I think the market for veterans is a little bit less high-paying than maybe it was a year ago when you had so many guys get moved for really high values, AJ Brown and Tyreek Hill and Russell Wilson. And it's possible that those guys, DeAndre Hopkins and Buda Baker and maybe Derrick Henry, they get moved on day 2 instead.
Wait, the Lions, I think, are going to be a very, very tough out next year. And they have, they just got, they're going to pick Jahmyr Gibbs here. They have 5 picks now this year in the top 55.
Oh my goodness.
Actually, and it's actually 5 of the next 43 picks starting at number 12. This is they have 5 picks in the first and second round that they can add to a team that already has a lot of talent on it. That's going to be a scary team next year, provided Jared Goff doesn't, fade
Jared
into
Goff. Provided Jared Goff doesn't just Jared Goff all over the place.
Yeah. I was going to say, do the Homer Simpson meme where he fades back into the bushes. But yeah, provided he doesn't Goff, that is going to be a scary team. That is going to be a scary team to play next year. They were scary this year.
Yeah, so they're a tough team under Dan Campbell. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust to the Jameson Williams suspension to start the season, but they still got a lot of talent on that football team, and now they got a guy that they can really get the ball to in so many different scenarios. And I guess this might mean the end of the DeAndre Swift era in Detroit. I know that that was not a really great fit with Swift and the Dan Campbell coaching staff, which is unfortunate because Swift is a really talented player. So I wonder if Swift gets moved in the next few days as well.
Well, let me throw this at you. The Eagles probably are still a running back short. DeAndre Swift is a Philly native. Does he fit? What would you you're probably looking at giving up something in 2024 for him. I can't imagine it would cost a ton.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a guy worth taking a flyer on. He's been hurt. He was hurt kind of early in his career, and then this year he got outsnapped by Jamal Williams, who had a really fantastic season.
That's true. Yeah.
So, he just hasn't had great luck since entering the league, but he was a fantastic player at Georgia. Like you said, he's from Philadelphia, and I think he would be a good fit with the Eagles, especially as a pass catching back.
Now he's from Georgia. We only take Georgia players.
Yeah, and he's from
Let him join the crew. Wow.
So what do the Packers do here now? What are the Packers? What are they without Aaron Rodgers?
They could do a few things. If I think probably the savvy move would be getting a weapon for Jordan Love, someone that they could really depend on from day one. Maybe it's Jackson Smith and Jigbo would make a lot of sense here. Maybe they want to get a tight end with Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington, but they could also go with a defensive player. I mean, the best players left in the draft, as far as I'm concerned, are Christian Gonzalez and Nolan Smith, both of whom would really help the Packers on the defensive side. As we saw, they got gashed last year against the Eagles trying to stop the run, and they have an expensive defense, but they weren't really able to stop people when it counted last year. So adding defensive prospects would make a lot of sense too.
Also, in case you were wondering, I don't even know what show this is that Micah Parsons has been joining tonight. Oh, it's the Bleacher Report Gridiron show. He nearly walked off the set after the Eagles took Jalen Carter.
Oh man.
In case this wasn't sweet enough for everyone. I don't have
Looks like the Jets traded up with the traded with the Packers for pick number 13 here,
Were they
and it
traded
looks,
back with the Packers?
yeah, I guess.
Because that was the Jets pick,
What?
right?
Yeah, and I think they're making, well, okay, I'm a little confused. Maybe I'm looking at something weird online here. So, who's picking next?
The Packers right now are picking.
Yeah,
And
the
the pick
Packers
is
are
in.
picking. Okay, then what I saw was not right. Yeah, okay.
So I was about to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
What are the Jets doing?
Something happened there.
And I haven't seen anything yet. I'm trying
It's
to.
defensive end Lucas Van Ness. Lucas Van Ness to the Packers at number 13.
That's a decent pick. That wouldn't be the pick that I'd make, but they clearly see the defense as still being a big need. Lucas Van Ness is a raw defensive end out of Iowa. He wasn't playing a ton of snaps like you'd want necessarily from a first round defensive lineman, but clearly very talented. He tested well at the combine, and his best football is probably still ahead of him. So I like this pick. I think it makes sense with their needs. And they also have a deep and young defensive front, so they'd be able to rotate him in, and they don't necessarily have to throw him, right into the fire immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I think the temptation would be to grab, like you said, an offensive player to give to Jordan Love. And I think if there was somebody there that they love, they would do that. But there's no stud wide receiver. Like, there are good wide receivers in this draft, but there's nobody that you're sitting there and you'd be saying like, oh, this guy's an immediate star. You put him on the field with Jordan Love, and all of a sudden you've got a number one. There's no, Ben, you know better than I would, and Jess, you probably know better than I would too on this. But there's no wide receiver that's like a Devontae Smith sitting here at this point. So.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, we've been spoiled the last few years with wide receiver prospects. I mean, even looking last year, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, both coming out of Ohio State, had 1,000 yards as rookies. Christian Watson was a very good rookie wide receiver as well. There were some others with Jahan Dotson doing pretty well, especially early in the year. And Drake London also down in Atlanta. But this year, I think the best prospect of this wide receiver class is Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I think there's a pretty big gap after him. Some guys that would be, could be first-round picks in the right context, but I don't see a lot of players in this wide receiver class that are surefire number one receivers on any offense. A lot more complementary guys where their success is mostly going to be dictated by the team that they get drafted onto.
One of my favorite things about draft night is when the players aren't in the green room and they have cameras set up at their house, and there's one girlfriend, sibling, family member that dives in the camera to like tackle them, and you see the arms coming to rip that was clearly like a little brother or a cousin that just happened to, and that was tremendous.
That's fantastic. The online community is filleting the Lions Jahmyr Gibbs pick. I mean, just filleting it. It's ugly out here, guys.
It's really the anti-running back stuff is so interesting because you're drafting a guy for their rookie contract. Everybody's like, well, you're not drafting for it's not going to be a 10-year player, but it's like, if you can get a really good player for 5 years, a guy who's going to really turn around your team, it's like, why don't you take him? And I think people overthink running back value. Whereas, running the ball is important in the NFL. How you get that running production varies from team to team. Gibbs, I think, is a pretty unique talent, and also is a value add in the passing game as well with his receiving skill. So I don't know. I think that people are very narrow-minded about running backs in the NFL right now. And I don't know, maybe there's eventual turnaround on that. But I think it's a good pick. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good pick.
The other thing to keep in mind, though, is they also gave David Montgomery a contract and brought him in this offseason as well. So I think that's part of the thing. They still have, the three they have in there, and then just, obviously they're going to part with one, and then they pick Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think that goes into the logic here, that they're just kind of thinking like, what are the Detroit Lions doing with their resources at the moment?
Well, I mean, they've got so many wide receivers there already. They didn't need any offensive skill position players. They've got a good offensive line already. Is Lucas Van Ness really that much better of an expenditure at 12 instead of Jahmyr Gibbs? Right. I mean, like that's the argument here. Like grabbing a defense, they need help on defense, although I think they've made some improvements this offseason. But is getting, if you take Lucas Van Ness there, just because of the positional difference, like is that so much better of a pick than Jahmyr Gibbs to be worth all the hand wringing? And I don't know that it is. I mean, offense wins in this league. So I would not have been upset if the Eagles took BGN at 10, to be perfectly honest with you. I was not on that bandwagon. I didn't think it would be necessarily the right pick, but I wouldn't have been mad about it either.
Yeah, and the other thing with Detroit is you can't discount how they view the Jameson Williams suspension, and not just what that means for Williams himself, but also for the fact that you're losing a vertical element of your offense. I mean, Williams was drafted specifically because he could take the top off the defense. He changes the defensive calculations. You bring the safeties way back, and that creates space in the middle of the field. Gibbs, it's a different position, but Gibbs is a home run threat. Anytime he touches the ball, he has the speed to take it to the end zone. He forces the defense to stretch out and account for that speed if he's lined up in the backfield or if he's lined up out at wide receiver. And I think that they really want to make sure that they have that element in their offense at all times, because that's how you create space for a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown to, catch a million passes in the middle of the field. They want to make sure that they're threatening deep, be it with a running back or the wide receiver. And the Gibbs pick makes a lot of sense. I mean, the only person who touches the ball more on offense than a running back is a quarterback. So making sure that those touches are being maximized, even if you have a David Montgomery there, Gibbs is, I think in the right context, Gibbs can be a really special player. And obviously the Lions agree with that.
So we have a trade that just happened. The Steelers have just jumped up in front of the Jets. I guess they were at 17. So jumped in front of the Commanders, in front of the Jets, trade with the Patriots for the number 14 overall pick. So we'll see what this has in store for us here.
Looks like they're taking offensive tackle Broderick Jones with this pick.
They could use some offensive linemen. That's probably a good idea on their end.
Yeah, in my final mock draft, I had them taking Darnell Wright because of how much they need to put offensive linemen around Kenny Pickett, and I think Broderick Jones is a really excellent pick. I think he has the physicality that they love in Pittsburgh. He can play guard, he can play right tackle, he can play left tackle. Just an instant impact, day one offensive lineman. I think that's a really good pick by them.
I mean, picking in the trenches in this stage of the draft, you're not going to go wrong at this point, because you've got a young quarterback too. They're trying to keep off the ground, and these guys are investments, and so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's very clear that the Jets wanted Broderick Jones too, because they had to make that jump in order to get him.
So what do the Jets do now? I mean, are they happy with the weapons they have around Aaron?
Yeah, I think they could take Njigba here. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially after they traded Elijah Moore. It gives them somebody who can play in the slot at a high level. But they could also go defense. There's still offensive linemen that they could get. There's Osiris Torrance who could play at guard. They could look at DeJuan Jones or Anton Harrison to play out at tackle. So there's a lot of different options for them. I just want to point out that Christian Gonzalez, Nolan Smith, I still think two of the better players in this draft are still on the board. And, for defense needy teams, it's surprising that they've been passed on at this point.
Yeah. So I think what we're planning on doing here is we're going to react through the only other pick, in the top 15-ish of the division. So we're going to get to the Commanders pick, see what they do, and then we're going to wrap up. But before we do that, we're going to bring Rachel in to check in on Twitter and the 3-word reaction to the Eagles pick and see what everybody is saying on Twitter and how, I mean, I think we all know how excited everybody is, but Eagles fans never cease to amaze us, right? So let's check in and see what we've got going on here on the Twitter.
It doesn't look like we have Rachel.
No, we're working on it eventually.
Yeah.
Maybe not. At a quick scroll, I'm not going to steal Rachel's thunder here, but at a quick scroll, it's looking pretty positive. But, you know.
Well, I mean, I think my 3 words would be, I'm so happy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, I mean, it really is, you know, a perfect match between player and team. And yeah, you're right. I would love to see 3 words from a fan who's upset about this. Like, what's the rationale?
I mean, the only drawback that I think anybody could rationally have is worrying about off-field stuff. But I think that this is a really good position for Jalen Carter to be in to mitigate all of that and hopefully kind of put all that stuff behind him.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so it looks like Rachel's having a little bit of technical difficulties here for some reason. So just to go through some of them quickly, you know, the first one that pops up, better than BGN. We've got a dreams come true. Perfect.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And then someone naturally confused about why we needed to move up one spot to get him. 1, duh. 2, not 3 words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the only negative one here.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason you move up is if other teams are trying to move up as well. And you know, the Bears were obviously fielding multiple calls about that pick, and the Eagles made the best offer, which was a 4th round pick, and you only have to move back 1 spot.
Right. And it wasn't, yeah, like we said before, why do people keep answering Howie Roseman's calls? Like
Yeah,
there's no harm, no foul on that one.
Somebody you got to think that there's a GM out. Every GM is like, I will be the one to outsmart Howie Roseman here. Everybody wants to be the first.
It's like, what's that? I'm thinking of like a show or something. I can't even put my finger on, like, I just have like this like scene in my head where someone like convinces, like, you know, manipulates someone into thinking that they've just made the best decision in whatever they did, and then they walk out and they're like, that's
Yeah, right.
crazy. Roseman, like, they call and Howie could, like, they're convinced that they just won this trade and this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. And then they walk out and see what happened and they're like, wait a damn minute.
Yeah. I'll say this. I think the Bears, I don't think Howie Roseman with moving up 1 spot, I don't think this was necessarily like brilliant Howie. And I think Howie's great. This is a great pick, you know, not going to argue with that pick at all. But the Bears weren't going to take Jalen Carter. They pretty clear that they were not going to, if they really liked him, they would have not traded back a spot. The fact that they traded back a spot to pick the player that they picked means they probably weren't going to take Jalen Carter anyway. So you're sitting there and you're like, well, we're not going to take this player anyway. This team wants to move up 1 spot and they want to give us a 4th round pick next year. Sure. Like, I'm not even going to bother trying to get a 3rd out of them next year. I mean, we're losing absolutely nothing. Right. And gaining a 4th round pick next season. And for the Eagles, it made sense. It made sure that they got it, that they got him. But I think the fact that the Bears made the move, I think it was smart, a smarter move by Chicago to just pick up a 4th round pick next year for literally doing exactly what they were going to do anyway. So good for the Bears. I think that was smart.
I absolutely agree. Thank you to Ryan Poles for being the trade partner in that.
Because it's entirely possible the Eagles could have just stood pat. The Bears would have taken who did they take now? I'm blanking on who they took.
Darnell, right.
Thank you. Yeah. And they would have gotten Jalen Carter at 10 and kept the 4th round pick next year. But that is also the advantage of having all those picks next year. You can trade a 4th away and you really don't feel it.
I'm an enormous fan of Nolan Smith playing cards with who I assume to be his mother while sitting waiting to be drafted.
Can you tell what they're playing? What are they playing?
It literally
Is it
looked like they were
pinochle?
playing like Go Fish or something. Like
Okay.
they had the card in between them on the couch, just very casually playing. He also has his whole squad in all white, which I'm also a fan of. But the cards thing was actually pretty funny.
The Nolan Smith lore is that he is really, really big on chess and cards. There was like an interview with him where he says that he plays chess all the time and it makes him a better football player. So I'm very, very on brand for him to be playing a card game during his draft party.
That's funny. All right, the Jets look really excited. Is Aaron Rodgers in the war room? You'd assume they just let him right on in there.
Well, I hope they FaceTimed him because he doesn't
Hope
talk
they
to him
check him first.
Got to make sure you're don't
They
even bother with
look really happy. They should if they take Christian Gonzalez here, I think that, I mean, they could go with another offensive line or an offensive skill player, but pairing Christian Gonzalez with Sauce Gardner would make that defense really scary.
The Jets are picking edge Will McDonald from Iowa State, it appears. Yep, that's the pick.
That's interesting.
Teams' boards are so much different than what we think is going to happen.
I like when that happens to everybody else that's not my own team. Yeah,
that's a little bit. I mean, Will McDonald, people have talked about Will McDonald as being a potential first-round pick. He was a really good player at Iowa State, but he's a little bit older. I believe he's a 24-year-old prospect. He's a little bit smaller. And when you look at smaller guys who are depending on quickness and snap anticipation at the college level, it's hard to project that to the NFL in a way that feels confidence inspiring. Obviously, Robert Saleh has a great feel for defensive players, and he's fielded great defenses over the course of his coaching career. So maybe he sees something that I'm not able to see right now, but I will say that's a little bit of a head scratcher.
Well, the Commanders are up next. So what are we thinking here? I mean, this is a team that's always hurting for skill position players on offense. No wide receivers have been taken. They could also get Christian Gonzalez here at cornerback.
Do they have a quarterback that they would like to continue with?
Maybe Will Levis? Could they go after a quarterback here?
They could go after Will Levis.
I feel
they
like
could go after Will Levis here. It would be a smart pick by them, which means they probably won't make it.
Right.
And but it makes a lot of sense too, because you're bringing new ownership in. It's kind of like a fresh start, and Levis makes a lot of sense. I do think that all the "we love Sam Howell" stuff that has been coming out of the Commanders over the last few months is all noise, and it would be great for them if one of the top prospects fell into their lap.
Yeah, that's a lot like all the noise we heard about how much the Eagles love Zach McPherson last year. It's okay. We'll see. I mean, but if they do go out and get a wide receiver here, that does signal that they really do like Howell. And, they also, they've got Jacoby Brissett, and they're in such a weird position right now. Like, if they want to win this year, they have some talent on that team that, as a 500 team last year, they win a couple more games this year, they're in the playoffs. And so if you want to win this year, Jacoby Brissett makes more sense than Sam Howell. But at some point also you have to plan for the future a little bit. So if they don't love Sam Howell, you can start Jacoby Brissett this year. You can get Will Levis and kind of have him learn under Jacoby Brissett for a year and have him go next year. But they just are in such a weird place right now in terms of where are they going?
Yeah, the whole, I mean, I think what's happening in the locker room and on that roster is a good it's like a metaphor for what's also happening with their ownership, where everything just feels like it's in purgatory right now. And they're just kind of in between a bunch of things, but they could really kind of make the picture a lot clearer with a quarterback pick. Levis makes a lot of sense, and kind of just try to start new and be like, all right, this is our guy. We're building around him. We haven't had a young guy to build around in a very long time, and it would make a lot of sense for them to do that. But Washington never does what makes sense.
Let's see. It's been quiet on quarterbacks for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. It looks like the Commanders are taking Emmanuel Forbes.
Wow. That's interesting.
The Commanders are commandering.
Forbes is a player. He had a lot of production at Mississippi State. He's extremely fast, talented cornerback. But the idea of an NFL cornerback weighing in under 170 pounds seems you got to be pretty hopeful for that to translate to the NFL, because in college football, if you're the fastest player on the field, that can make a big difference for how you play. But in the NFL, you can't just be the fastest player on the field, because players are as fast as you. They're bigger too. And lining up a 170-pound cornerback across from AJ Brown does not
exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, does not seem like the best possible way to build your defense. And I could be wrong. He could put on weight. He could be, the defensive version of Devontae Smith, where he's too skilled and too athletic for the size to matter. But cornerback is mostly a reactive position. You're being dictated to by what the offense is doing. And when you're a smaller player who could get pushed around at the line or can get bullied at the catch point by larger wide receivers, that's a big concern. And this is, it's a player that I'm a little bit lower on than a lot of, I think, the draft community. So obviously the Commanders are really betting on that athleticism, really betting on that, on his ball skills. But for me as an Eagles fan, I'm saying, well, let's see if he can cover 220-pound AJ Brown.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Gonzalez is sitting there. I mean, and everybody has him. But it just, again, teams have their own boards, and it is just sometimes weird to try and get inside their heads and figure out why it is they have these players ranked the way they do, because they obviously have him ranked ahead of Christian Gonzalez, and I would be fascinated to find out how many other teams had a similar ranking. But
yeah, the Gonzalez stuff is really interesting, because on paper he has everything you'd want from an NFL cornerback. He's 6'1", he's around 200 pounds, he's extremely athletic. He played 2 years at Oregon. He had great ball production. He's a decent tackler, not a great tackler, but a decent tackler. And for him now to be have two cornerbacks go ahead of them is pretty surprising.
Is this another instance of a front office just outsmarting themselves?
That's what it feels like. I mean, I just the Forbes stuff it's hard to, because it's like if you wanted to go pure athlete at corner, Deonte Banks from Maryland is also on the board still, and he is as good of an athlete as Emmanuel Forbes, and is actually has a little bit more muscle on him, a little bit closer to NFL size. So, like I said, it's not a player I've been as high on as a lot of other people in the draft community, and obviously not as high as the Commanders front office. But in terms of what he does very well, he is a great athlete. I mean, he moves incredibly well. He had the speed to run with receivers in the SEC. He's very skilled. His footwork is great. He plays man and zone coverage very well. He's a smart player. And, he got a ton of production, intercepting the football, which is a valuable thing to have on your defense. But the make or break for him is going to be, can a player his size play at the NFL level at a high level? And, for a cornerback to be weighing at under 170 pounds is unprecedented in the NFL.
Mark McMillan is very happy right now, though. So that's what's important.
Yeah.
Tiny man playing cornerback. He's actually pretty good back in the day. Yeah, those guys are few and far between.
Yeah,
Certainly not a first round pick.
Different kinds of wide receivers you're lining
Different
up
era.
against. Yeah.
Also, going back to the Micah Parsons thing, apparently said he was sick to his stomach. And then Jalen Brown. AJ Brown just sat there and aggressively rubbed it in his face.
Man, the NFL community is not happy the Eagles got him. And it's a blessed day.
Are we turning into the villains? Are we becoming the villains of the league?
Yeah.
Embrace it.
Oh, it's so sweet. It's so good to be an Eagles fan sometimes. It's weird because there are times when you kind of want to jump off a tall building. But well, I mean, pretty good.
Yeah, last year I really felt like, as the season was going on, I'm like, are we starting something kind of special here? Like 2017 was really awesome. It came out of nowhere, and last year came out of nowhere too. But last year, the Super Bowl almost felt inevitable at a certain point in the season. 2017, I think, felt like that for a bit, and then Carson went down, and we all lost our minds. But last year, it just felt like this team was a machine. Like, it was just methodical how they beat people. They didn't blow a lot of teams out, but it was just methodical. And
I think it was the Titans game where I was like, okay, we're going to be in the Super Bowl, I guess. It's just like manhandling them. Yeah, I agree with you. I think 2017 really felt like even when Wentz was playing, it felt like a Cinderella run where we're like, okay, we're good kind of out of nowhere right now. But last year, like you said, like it was just like a realization where like, oh, we're just really good. Like the whole roster is great and the coaching is great. Everybody's buying in. So, it does feel like the start of something special. So the hope is that it is.
It's weird because you think about some of the years where we go into it, right? And you're like, before the season even starts, you're like, this is our year. Look at this roster. Who's going to beat us? 16-0, Super Bowl, here we come, right? And those are the years you come in and you go 4-12, like dream team year, right? So that's what happens. Then there's these years where you come in, you're like, they've got some good pieces, but we'll see. But those have been 2017 and the 2022 year. Like, I remember going into 2017 and, they signed LeGarrette Blount. They bring in Chris Long. They bring in Torrey Smith, Alshon Jeffrey. Like, they do all this stuff. And you're like, I mean, this could, like, really work out, but also, like, the Eagles, quarterback in his second year. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Light the damn world on fire. Same thing this year. They make all the right moves. They adjust everything. They trade for AJ Brown. They had just drafted Devontae Smith the year prior. They do all the right things. And you're like, we have to rely on Jalen Hurts to take that big step. Can he take that step? Is he going to, be the quarterback that we hope he can be? Good Lord.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it felt very Patriots-like last year, how they rolled through. And that's what I keep coming back to. It's like if this team if Jalen Hurts can continue to do what he does and the offense is going to stay together for a little while, the defense, they can keep kind of replacing some pieces here like they did tonight. This could be a really good team for a long time. And asking for a Patriots run is not reasonable, but a good 4 or 5 year run where they're just the assassins of the NFL. There's a real chance that this is what we're looking at. But again, there's still a lot that needs to happen before we get there. But that's the goal. I mean, I think you're looking at, we've talked about the Chiefs as a dynasty. Mm-hmm. Maybe the Eagles are building towards something like that. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, Christian Gonzalez is officially off the board to the Patriots.
Speaking of the Patriots, right?
And with that, let's wrap it up really quick. What do you think the Eagles are going to do at 30? Are they going to stay at 30 and make a pick? Are they going to trade out of the first round? Are they going to trade up and surprise everybody? What do you think is going to happen with this next pick before we hop out of here?
I think it's going to be Nolan Smith or Brian Branch. Those are my shots. I think they're going to stay in the first round, maybe move up, maybe stay where they are. But I think it's going to be one of Nolan Smith or Brian Branch. I think they're going to keep adding to that defense. Safety is a big hole after Marcus Epps and CJ Gardner-Johnson left. And, Branch is somebody who come in and play both safety spots at a high level. And then Nolan Smith would just, turbocharge their already insane offensive or defensive line. He could rotate in with Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, bring a lot more speed to that group. And he'd also be just a versatile piece for Sean Desai in his defense. So I think those are really smart picks. I know that they were high on Nolan Smith. It could have been a pick at 10. So if he's hanging around in the early 20s, it wouldn't surprise me if they try to make a move up for him.
Yeah,
What about you,
I
John?
think that sounds good, and I think if they do move out of the first round, it'll be for a team that wants to grab. If Will Levis is still there or Hendon Hooker is still there, they'll move out of the first round, move back down like 9 or 10 spots, and grab a cornerback there, grab a safety, grab a running back in that spot. Maybe even grab a tight end. They really could use a backup tight end, and seeing what's left on the board at that point, that could be a target as well. But I think as this is falling, I think it's more likely they move up from 30 than it is they move back. And I wouldn't have said that earlier in the day.
Yeah,
I think
I absolutely agree with you.
This is shaken out way differently, I think, than most people would. And, I think people really just are hesitant to let a guy who puts mayo in his coffee lead their locker room. I think that's questionable. And truth be told, I get it. Like, I can understand where some of these other potential, red flags can be sorted out. How are you going to get a group of grown men to trust a grown man who puts mayo in his coffee?
It's a fair point.
If your boss at work told you that every day he scoops a dollop of mayo in his coffee and that's the best way to start the day, do you trust that man going forward? Or
That's
woman?
not my leader.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't even really like mayonnaise on a sandwich, so I don't know if I'd like it on a cup of coffee either.
Well, I can assure you I would not like it in my cup of coffee. Will Levis, that was the whole thing. He puts mayo.
Psychopaths
What's the
do
other
that.
thing? There was another thing. It was mayo in his coffee, and there was one more weird thing.
Well, here's the deal. And I think we saw this with Carson a little bit. If you are a weird guy, quarterback's not the best position to draft somebody who's a little off kilter. And we're making fun of the mayonnaise and the coffee thing, but it speaks to a larger thing where, with a quarterback, you want somebody who can relate to everybody and who's not an oddball. I'm trying to think of oddball quarterbacks who are really, exactly, who are really popular and really successful. And I'm sure there have been some, but none of them are leaping to mind.
I mean,
the guys I can think of off the top of my head are Aaron Rodgers is definitely an oddball, but he was so good that it didn't matter for a long enough time.
And I guess Tom to an extent with the whole TB12 thing and the avocado ice cream,
he got weird.
Yeah, he's got that Tom Cruise dead behind the eyes kind of look to him. But to a certain level, you got to think that, to also be that good at what I think is the hardest position in sports, you also have to be a little bit unwell to get there.
You got to be a sick.
So
yeah,
I think every great quarterback has that weird aspect to their personality, but not every quarterback is putting mayo in their coffee.
You've got to be a little insane to just decide one day that you want to squat 600 pounds. But that's the kind of a little off kilter, a little insane that you need to be a quarterback.
Yeah, it's insane in a cool way. People were like, "Oh, you're crazy," but you would you jump on a grenade for me. But with Will Levis, you're like, "Okay, you're crazy, but you're kind of weird. It's not cool the way that you're crazy."
Yeah, there's jumping on a grenade crazy, and there's making grenades in your basement crazy. And
you
want to be the former, not the latter.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good place to stop. I think right there is where we need to wrap this one up. So we're about we are halfway through the draft right now. I had to do some quick math in my head, which I'm not very good at, but halfway through the draft, the Eagles have got their guy. They jumped up to get their guy to make sure and secure that he would be an Eagles green. So far, I haven't really seen anything negative about it. So hope everybody in Eagles Nation is super, super, super happy with that. I'm sure we'll all stay up to see what they do at 30, but thank you so much for everyone joining us tonight, coming in, chatting with us in the comments. Thank you for hanging out with us for the last hour and a half. Make sure you're subscribed on BGN Radio anywhere you get your podcast. Leave a 5-star rating, written review, thumbs up, the whole thing. We're going to have plenty of stuff coming out, especially as OTAs are getting started and then going into the summer, preseason, and all that good stuff. For myself, John, Ben, Rachel, thank you for joining us on BGN Radio. Go Birds, and we will see you soon.